All right there, everyone. The Louisiana Attorney General denies hundreds of millions of dollars to Citibank and Bank of America over their liberal stance on gun control. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. It's another edition of Doing Business in an Age of Populism series. Here on this channel, we analyze current events in light of conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. And this, of course, is particularly for this video, is particularly for your professional flourishing. We have a very good lesson on what it means to do business in an age of populism coming out of Louisiana. Citibank and Bank of America have recently adopted self-appointed gun control measures on their business clients by requiring gun stores for whom they're supplying credit services. They're requiring these gun stores to quit selling what they call high-capacity magazines as a prerequisite to doing business with these banks. Citibank put the extra requirement that long gun sales could no longer be extended to anyone between the ages of 18 to 20. Apparently, Citibank hasn't thought through what the average age for enlisted men in the U.S. military is, which is under 21. Not only that, but you, of course, have the full legal right to purchase long guns in this nation if you're between the age of 18 to 20. So this is clearly, I would argue, at least a Second Amendment violation on the part of Citibank. Well, now legislators in Louisiana are, shall we say, firing back. The Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry and the state's bond commission have officially denied $600 million to Citibank and Bank of America in the form of road financing plan in the state. As I understand it, the two banks would have been able to help finance an interstate highway deal to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. But as of today, that business opportunity is gone. It is dead when it comes at least to Citibank and Bank of America. Their alliance with left-wing activists has just cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in business. Now, of course, this isn't the first time we've seen lawmakers take actions like this. If you recall, the Georgia legislature did something very comparable. I believe it was earlier this year where a number of pro-gun lawmakers in effect punished Delta Airlines for cutting ties with the National Rifle Association by killing a proposed tax break that would have saved the airline millions of dollars a year. It was a tax break on jet fuel that was extended to Delta, and it was part of a sweeping tax bill that Republicans were about to pass. But after they found out that Delta had suspended its discount to NRA members under politically correct pressure from anti-gun liberals, they amended the tax bill and passed it overwhelmingly without the tax cut extended to Delta. Delta is an Atlanta-based company. It has over 30,000 employees in Georgia. And the tax break would have been, as I understand it, would have been worth close to $40 million a year. And so it was a very substantial sanction against a company for backing down in standing up for Second Amendment of the Constitution and cowering to politically correct liberals. And of course, we saw the mass backlash against Roger Goodell and the NFL. And if what those two kneeling players did the other week from the Miami Dolphins is any indicator, this football season is going to be just as bad, if not worse, in terms of ratings and fall in merchandise sales. But when all is said and done, what we're getting from legislatures in Louisiana and Georgia and the backlash against the NFL is a very, very important lesson of what it means to do business in an age of nationalism and populism. In such an age, economic activity is returning to the local. Economic activity is returning to the local. This is very important. Let me flesh this out. Because I think if we're going to see success in our entrepreneurship in an age of nationalist populism, we're going to have to understand this principle. In the age of globalism, which has been characterized political and economic activity for the last several decades, that age of globalism has been characterized by something called disembedding. And disembedding is the propelling of economic activity away from localized control towards more transnational, translocal processes. I like to use the example of the mall to explain disembedding to my students. So think about your local mall, right? So in one sense, the mall is, of course, local, at least in terms of its proximity to consumers. It's a 15-minute drive away kind of thing, right? So it's local in that sense. But in another sense, it's anything but there's really actually nothing local about your mall, since the retail outlets that comprise the various stores of a mall are anything but local, right? They're all national and international chains and brand names. This is what makes the mall the mall. It's a local manifestation of translocal, transnational retail outlets. Just think if you go to the movie theater in a mall, right? Is that local talent being featured in those theaters, right? So whether we're going to the movies or to the stores or to the food court, a mall in many ways is a monument to disembedding processes, the disembedding processes of globalism. And by the way, I'm not saying I hate malls or anything. I'm just using it as an example. Now, the important point here is that businesses can make the mistake of thinking that we're still living in an age of the mall, as it were. In other words, it doesn't matter where you are doing business, since all localities have been subsumed under this local, transnational, worldwide economy. The local simply doesn't matter anymore. What matters is implementing a kind of standardization so you have a one-size-fits-all product that can serve as many national or global customers as possible in this globalized economy. That's what we still might think is going on. But what scholars are writing about more and more is that this vision of a one-size-fits-all globalized economy is collapsing. It's collapsing under the weight and pressures of the rise of a new nationalism, a new nationalist populism that is quite literally sweeping the world. And it's collapsing at two levels. This is key. You want to get this. At one level, it's collapsing simply by virtue of the unique requirements and standards that nations now have for economic activity. So here, you're dealing with India's requirement 30% of all products sold within the nation have to be manufactured within India. Or China's requirement that computer makers have to produce unique CPUs and operating systems to meet their insanely strict cybersecurity standards. We could go on and on. Regardless of what specific nationalist issue you're dealing with, businesses are having to more and more come to terms with the fact that economic interactions are increasingly what we call bilateral. That is, they're increasingly characterized by unique requirements specific to a nation and its economic policies. A one-size-fits-all multilateral economic protocol is being replaced more and more by bilateral trade negotiations and economic activity that maintains the economic uniqueness of the nations involved. That's the first thing. However, there's a second level where this globalized economy is collapsing, and that's the level of globalized values, okay? Up to this point, economics is not the only thing that's been disembedded through globalized dynamics. Localized customs, cultures, traditions have also been eclipsed by transnational processes that's given rise to what scholars call consumer-based lifestyle values. And this is where, as a consumer, I have the right now to choose everything from my career to my religion to my gender to my self-identity, you name it. In such a globalist, consumer-based world, traditions and customs look increasingly odd and strange, and indeed, they look increasingly oppressive and discriminatory. And so it's no problem to kneel during the national anthem in protest to a discriminatory nation that has yet to come to terms with its white supremacy ingrained in its traditions and politics. Or it becomes a matter of common sense to boycott the NRA and its stupid, backwards, knuckle-dragging like notion of gun ownership and legally encouraged violence. And it's obvious that our business is going to support Planned Parenthood and other feminist organizations that see the traditional family as nothing more than a patriarchal oppression, and on and on and on. That's the value system that has governed globalized business over the last few decades. Well, that value system is collapsing as well. Again, whether you're dealing with Poland's recently passed legislation that bans all business activity on Sundays, by the year 2020, or with Russia's ban on what they call homosexual propaganda, or the increased crackdown on NGOs financed by George Soros throughout Hungary. Again, we could go on and on. The important point here is that the consumer-based lifestyle values that have defined global corporations for the last several decades are more and more collapsing under the weight of a renewed sense of localized custom, tradition, and ways of life that define specific populations. And so, the practical side to all of this is that businesses are now going to have to realize that they simply cannot standardize their preferred value systems any longer. Boycotting the NRA or the national anthem may work in San Francisco. It sure ain't no way on God's green earth is such disrespect going to play in Louisiana and Georgia. Right? You got to get this. Again, globalized nations think, globalized sentiments think that it doesn't matter. Right? All values are the same. That's not true anymore with the rise of nationalist populism. If you decide to standardize your commitment to liberal lifestyle values in politics, you're going to be punished in the heartland of America now. They're not going to want to have anything to do with you. This is what happened, by the way, to Dick's Sporting Goods of late, right? Dick's listened to metropolitan liberals rather than their heartland customers, and their sales have dropped dramatically over the last year in protest against their new policy of gun restrictions. It's the stupidest thing they could have done imaginably, because their customer base are not anti-gun metropolitan liberals. It's heartland conservatives. And who do they turn around and side with? It's crazy because their board of directors, I'm sure, are made up of metropolitan liberals. You have to get rid of this old globalist, outdated, consumer-based lifestyle values mindset that thinks you can universalize and standardize these globalist values. That's not happening anymore. As we're seeing in Louisiana and Georgia, indeed even in the White House, conservative politicians will have no problem looking to score some good, easy political points by punishing your business, like they're doing with Delta and Citigroup and Bank of America and the NFL. If you even think of universalizing liberal values from now on. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on our Patreon link below. Become a monthly supporter of this channel and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of these awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.